Trigger warning. The following podcast discusses a range of issues connected to mental health, including depression, drug use, alcoholism, and suicide. This podcast is created to encourage people to share their experiences and remove the taboo around poor mental health. But unless stated, no participants are mental health professionals. Viewer and listener discretion is advised.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Head Up podcast. This is episode 3. Apologies, this has taken a little longer to put together than our first couple of episodes. I was hoping to get these out on a weekly basis, but unfortunately a few things managed to get in the way. But here we are with episode 3 and episode 4 coming shortly after. As you've probably noticed, we've had a couple of issues and a couple of changes with the lineups for what's happening with Head Up. Everything is still going ahead, but we have now had to move out of the forum and into the basement of the Sussex for Smallwoodstock. That is the gig that's in aid of Jonny, who is my best friend. That actually, I think, was the last place that we played together as a band in Rachel's back in 2012 or 2013, I can't quite remember. So it is still a fitting location for us to play. It's a smaller venue. It's actually going to be, for me, a little bit more fun. It's a little sweatbox down there. So if you are looking to get tickets for Smallwoodstock, it has now moved out of the forum. It is in the basement of the Sussex. There will be less than 20 tickets available for that. So if you were intending to come and pay on the day, I can't guarantee that there's going to be access. So please try and get your tickets early. Those that have already bought their tickets, they'll be honoured and the additional monies will go to charity. The show that was supposed to be in the basement of the Sussex, which was the Cove Miler show, that's now been moved to the Saturday the 9th. It's still going ahead, so everything else is happening on the Friday the 8th, but Cove Miler has been moved to Saturday the 9th. And thank you to everybody that came together at last minute to try and save everything that we've been putting together for this. All shows are going to go ahead and it's going to be fantastic. In this episode of the podcast, I wanted to focus on one of the reasons why we're doing what we're doing, and that is for my friend Jonny Smallwood. In a practice session that took place a couple of weeks ago, I had the chance to sit down with my friend Tom Diamond and Andy Parker as well, who were good friends of Jonny, long before I even met him, as we'll go into in the podcast. But I wanted to share with you something before we go into this, and we were going to touch on this during the podcast, but we ran out of time. One of the reasons that this hits so hard for me, and also for Tom Diamond, is that we were on site when Jonny was found, and we were actually very, very close to being the two people that found him. And if it wasn't for us calling the police, we would have actually kicked his door in and unfortunately found him, which I think is a sight that would have probably haunted us for the rest of our lives. I want to talk with respect about this as an issue. Ultimately, a person has lost their life and it affects the lives of the friends, but specifically the family as well. So, I'm not going to go into any sort of gory detail because there's no point in that. There's no glamorization of the situation, but I need to be transparent, wholly transparent about what happened on that day and how it affected me and us. It was a very, very difficult day. It's probably one of the most difficult days I've ever experienced in my life, and it's important to note that and to say and to talk about Jonny as a person who was fantastic with all of us. He was my best friend, as I say. He was a fantastic musician, a talented man, a gentleman, a pain in the arse. We're all that way. We all have something. Come on, guys. But somebody that even 10 years later, and I'm sure many, many years after this, will be sorely missed and well remembered. But I wanted to open it up so that folks that didn't get a chance to meet Jonny or know Jonny can get to understand the sort of person that he was, what he meant to us, and the reason that we're doing this. And there have been countless other people that I've known since Jonny that have also unfortunately taken their lives, and this is also an ode to them. So this is a conversation with Tom Diamond and Andy Parker talking about Jonny, and hopefully shedding a little bit of light on the person that he was and the reason that we're doing this.
So today I'm sitting with two guys that are very familiar and fond of Jonny, with Andy and Tom, who were friends long before I even met Jonny actually way before then. And I think that's good because it means that we get a chance to maybe talk about different sort of eons of Jonny as a person and not just my reflection. But today's podcast, as I mentioned at the top, will be about Jonny and as an example of somebody who was part of a large musical family and unfortunately wrestled his demons. He would have loved that, wrestled his demons.
Yeah.
Didn't we see them at the Underworld?
Yeah, I'm sure we did. I'm sure we did. Yeah, they were third on the bill. Wrestled his demons and unfortunately didn't come out on top, So that's why we're doing this, in a way, is to talk about Jonny and bring him to life a little bit. And then after this, we're actually going to go and rehearse all the songs for his show. So I'm going to throw it out there. When did you first meet Jonny?
I don't know.
Great, Tom.
I don't know, but I know the point at which I was like, this guy really fucking hates me. I'm going to have to make him like me. Was at college, and I think it must have been like my first year, and it was just rain happened, so everyone dives into a building, and we ended up stood next to each other avoiding rain, and I was just staring at him, slightly paralyzed and also fixated, because first of all, I guess it was like 1998, I didn't know anyone else who had the balls to have some kind of Elvis quiff. That was a bit weird. And he had a Will Haven t-shirt on, a hoodie.
Standard.
Yeah.
And I just thought, I don't think I know anyone else on the planet that knows who that is. And you have a hoodie, which means you've probably actually seen them.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure he hated me for years. Absolutely hated
Jonny
me.
hated everybody.
But he really hated me. And I don't know quite what it was that managed to curry his favour. But I think it was just being persistent and really irritating. And because we went to really obscure gigs in really obscure places. So it's not like a given that you were going to bump into each other.
Yeah.
And I remember being in some really random Kentish town to watch some mates bands play, and we're all part of this same at then very, very big circle. We had this network of people in Tunbridge Wells, which was connected to Faversham and Folkestone and Deal and Hastings, and so there was this big community of people, so you're kind of expecting people to sort of be around. And I think he may have been actually impressed that I knew who this band was and that I was there. And maybe that was a bit of a kind of, I'd sort of broken through the door a little bit.
Yeah.
And was like, oh, yeah, really obscure stuff. Yeah, I'm already there. So, yeah.
That sounds like it would have been an in, big time.
Yeah, it was enough.
Important.
That and just kind of, I think I'm not going to be able to get rid of this little twerp. So, but I guess you must have met him before then, right? Because you kind of knew each other sort of like late school era as well, no?
Well, I think the first time I met Jonny would have been the first time we ever played at the Forum, I think. Because of course,
As Caution.
As Caution, yeah. Because, that happened, well, it might even have been before that. I don't know, but we're talking around 96, 97. Because I know that because we had to get taxis to the first time we ever played because we were too young to drive.
Wild.
And, remember my old man was going to give us a lift or something, but it fell through. So, yeah, we literally got a cab with like guitar heads, just like the absolute young Muppets that we were. And we were playing with Unfounded.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd met Andy at a show, I think it was DBH, playing a show at the Forum, and I remember Danny and I jumping the bus to go there because we'd seen it in Kerrang, and so when you saw something in Kerrang or Metal Hammer and then it was on at the Forum, that was just like, right. And of course that was, at that time, that's where we were forging our own paths, and so that's massively a part of your identity. And you think back and think, yeah, unfortunately that identity did revolve around some pretty ridiculous jeans, but that's
still do.
Speak for yourself.
They still do.
I remember
to a lot
your
of people.
jeans. Your jeans were massive.
Well, they had to fit over your head.
Yeah,
if you could get them on your
that's
head,
true.
then they were baggy enough. and so I think that was the first time. It would have been either at that DB8 show or certainly when we did the show with Unfounded. I just remember he was just this guy with the biggest smile. He was always smiling, always having a laugh, always ribbing, and that kind of fitted with how we were used to socialising. And then, of course, that you mentioning there, Andy, about the kind of obscure references, that's then seemed to carry on because whilst obviously we were more Sussex side than the Kent side, but if there was a UK hardcore show going on in Brighton, then we'd be down at that, or we'd be up at the Forum, or we'd be in Maidstone, wherever those shows were. And then you start seeing, it's like, oh no, well, Johnny's there.
Yeah.
And Johnny's there. And then you'd be like, oh yeah, I'm really excited to see this. But whether it was, I don't know, whether it was Stamping Ground, whether it was Majula Nocte, whether it was something horrible. It was generally something horrible. And or then you would go to the next show, you'd bump into each other, and then he would have a cool T-shirt on. And you'd be like, oh, I've heard about that band.
Yeah.
I better check them out. Because if Johnny's got the shirt, they're going to be decent.
I think
And
that
so
was
there was a lot
totally
of
that.
that.
Totally that.
And so
the
therefore,
tastemaker.
whether you're at the Free Butt in Brighton or the Pressure Point or whatever, and you just trusted him. He was like the almanac of all things.
Yeah.
And I don't know where, this is, this isn't pre-internet, but it's pretty blooming close. So I don't know how he was picking up on all of this stuff because he would know about the greatest bands. And normally it was the quest for the ever horrible. We'd always find something, not on the cover, but it was always on the hardcore side, not so much like death metal and, long hair and painted faces so much. It was more something obscure. And I remember, and Danny was the same, Danny from, the singer in the Hurt Process was like a mini Johnny in terms of his knowledge. And so he would show up and he'd be like, oh mate, have you heard the new whatever, Hammer Smash Face, whatever, something horrendous.
Yeah.
And then Johnny would always just be like, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
But it was always so low key.
just so
It was
casual.
always so like, I got that.
Yeah.
I've got-
up. Oh, well done.
I've got the split.
But
they
was
did
it
with-
like that?
Yeah, because it was unbelievably smug. I think that so there was sort of like two people. Johnny was older than me. In my year at school, there was another guy, and they are very much for that period of time. They were the two staple individuals at the Forum, which is a chap called Will O'Shea, who is in some truly terrifying bands now, and well worth checking out. But it was basically those two. You could pretty much guarantee like anything that you needed to know about, that was your entry.
Yeah.
Was them. And same kind of thing actually, that they if they were going to a show, they would both be at that show because it was just so random and dirty that it was a given. And so if they were there, and your point on they're like, oh yeah, I've heard of that shirt. I used to have that with him as well, and then just be really pissed afterwards because I'd be like thinking back to it and sort of like, you're thinking of that 90s, early noughties was the only way you got that shirt was because you'd gone to a
'cause
gig
you'd
the
been at
week
the show.
before.
Yeah.
So it was like, so how exactly did you know about that?
Exactly.
And I didn't. And that was one of my motivators for trying to infiltrate the circle was to be able to get to the show because he knew them. So it was like, how do I get onto that limited SIM card mobile phone address book so that I get the message of we're going to Faversham to watch Rando McRando.
The funny thing about that is, and I don't know whether this is because of him mellowing as he got a little bit older, because I'll go into when I first met him, which is probably at least a decade after you did, was that he never had the lauding aspect, certainly with me anyway. He would always try to tell me to like something, and I mentioned this on the last podcast when I was speaking to Armandine, actually. He would say, oh, you would love Carnival. Oh, you really should listen to, even Faith No More and stuff. And as I mentioned previously, I'm a cunt when it comes to that. You can't tell me what to like, even if I know I like it. And I've only just got to the end of the almanac now of things that he suggested to me that I remembered that I would love, and I do love. And
like that new Bush record.
oh, fuck off. That's very much still at the bottom of my pile of things to even get round to. That was very annoying playing that bass line.
Golden
Stuck in my
State is
head.
a masterpiece and everyone needs to know that.
No, that's been redacted instantly from this podcast. You said I had creative control. But yeah, he didn't have that with me, but he did have constant suggestions. And but I do still have that thing in my mind of when it comes with a Johnny recommendation, it's solid.
Oh, absolutely.
Even if I didn't want to listen to it out of being a dick, I knew that it was good.
But if you don't like it, you question yourself. That's what I was
Yeah.
like. He'd be like,
You
you got to
find-
listen to this. Have you heard that record? Like, oh, I didn't know they'd made that record. You know what? Fly Kick, McHardcore, whatever. You'd be like, oh,
Yeah.
let's put it on. You'd listen to it and go, I don't know, man.
What am I missing?
Sounds a bit derivative. I think I've heard that kind of riff before, and then you'd be like, yeah, but hang on, what am I missing? I'm like, there's something
There's
here.
something.
You would actually question it because he was so low key with it.
Yeah.
Like I think you saying that, he'd never lauded about. He never had to. He had a beautiful sort of quiet confidence with that part of his life.
It was with a wink and a smile, and
Yeah.
he would just get on with it.
He'd just be like, yeah, I got that.
I first met Jonny at the Tunbridge jams that we did when you came with Danny and Max and played some, I think you played some THB stuff, and we went on before that with, I think Max played drums for us as well, and my friend Matt, and we did some terrible Killswitch covers, I
I was
think.
going to say, I thought, yeah, I remember Killswitch.
But he was there at that, and there's a photo of him and Dan standing in the doorway of the station house, and that was the first night I met him. And I had a very similar thing to you actually, in the sense of, this guy's really cool, and I bet he thinks I'm just like an annoying little kid that's hanging around and just being very annoying. But it didn't take long for us to make friends, mainly because of music, partly because of wrestling, and moreover because we both felt that it was absolutely necessary every time we met each other to go through the little flip book of sayings and impressions and things, and we had to do them all in the 2-3 hours that we spent together every single time. And it would be a competition almost, completely unspoken, a competition to see who could get the most in whilst we were doing something, and that they were numerous and completely unfunny to anybody else. Utterly not funny at all.
You get the most in every night, mate.
Exactly.
Sideways.
There you go. So it was all that kind of stuff. And then getting to be in a band with him. And I think the other guys would know this as well. But for me, it very much felt like the band, Rachel's Got a Flamethrower, there were 5 of us, but it was 3 and 2. It was Kev and Pete and Rob, and then me and Jonny.
Oh, the schoolboy divide. Yeah.
And we worked together and we collaborated, and actually we clashed a lot. There was a lot of ego going on in that room, but there was this clear divide of not us and them, but certainly when it came to writing and things like that and general conversation, they tended to group and we tended to group. Which
Relationships as well, though, isn't it? Because those three, I went to school with all of that lot. Like, we were all in completely different years, but we were at the same school, and our school was grim.
Yeah.
But it also means we're from Tunbridge, and you were all from Tunbridge Wells, and that's what I mean of that schoolboy mentality.
Filthy Ken.
Just it's disgusting. Shut up, Crowborough.
Jarvis Brook. It's Crowborough. I think you'll find it's Uckfield.
The
my dear boy.
Uckers.
Oh dear.
Yeah, I can get that. I think the thing with Rachel's was, I can't think of a time in knowing Jonny where the question mark was always there as to how the fuck is it that this person isn't fronting a band?
Yeah.
And he was involved in something which was super short lived, which I think was called 1,000 Miles Per Hour, and it was guys from Flex, which was like a post rock band, but they were super into Helmet, and he'd been talking to one of them about Helmet on the Common for hours and hours and hours, and then it was all of a sudden of like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this thing. I think they maybe did 2 shows, and it was unexpected. You know, when you look at someone and you don't know what's going to come from this because you haven't seen them perform, and then you do, and just think, I don't understand why it's taken that long. And then it must have been, it could have been 10 years for all I know, between that and then doing Rachel's. So when that all came about, it was just like, well, yeah, that's bloody obvious, isn't it? Why wouldn't you do that? And then the range that was there as well was totally unexpected, I think, from a lot of people. Because it's not even like you would sit in the car and sing along to tunes. So to then actually see what he was actually capable of doing was very unexpected.
Yeah, and I think that his nature generally, that kind of complete difference in his daily demeanour, except for when he was slightly irritated by something, and then seeing him on stage, it just, I've got 2 paintings that he did in my flat, and both of them are essentially of demons, and one of them has got a lot of words written on it, And I had it up in my house, in my old flat, and my ex-girlfriend said to me, are these lyrics from a song? Like, has he just written out, something from Saves Day or something? I was like, I'm not sure. I've never really thought about it, actually. And she looked it up, and she couldn't find it anywhere. So I actually have Jonny's lyrics unused. None of them were in Rachel's, on this, almost like a parchment, that have never been used at all, just hanging in my
that's sweet.
in my
I didn't know
house.
that.
No, not a clue. So at some point I will use them for something, I'd imagine, or I'll slip a couple of them into whatever. But it's little things. Anyway, the demons on both of these things, both of these paintings, in my mind, are manifestations of him. That's what's in his head, because they are slightly different, but they're painted in very much the same way. And it's a little bit like the drawings that he did for the Rachel's album cover, which is each one of us with like horns coming out of us and skin falling off and all that sort of thing, which I've got mine and his of. So that was another sort of artistic expression that he had. But I often, when I think about him performing, and when I think about the difference between the way he held himself in everyday life versus performing, and then when he did those two things together, the music, his vocals and his paintings, they're the visual and audio expression of what was going on in his head, which, to a greater or lesser extent, I think all of us knew that he had issues. I mean, we've all got issues, as we sort of said before we came on. And I think we knew that he expressed them in just sort of shutting down and going away and doing his own thing, which was a very mature way of doing it. I don't really remember, certainly in my time, you guys can correct me if you know of anything else, I don't think I ever really saw him act out. I don't know whether you would agree with that. I can't remember an instance where he went off the deep end and
I think you were there as well. There was
this
there
could
was
be
a
pre-me.
there was a moment.
Yeah, was it our moment? It didn't happen regularly, or was it our moment?
No, this was very much a one-off thing. But again, kind of like just brushed it off. But the one time I've ever seen a remote act of violence was in self-defense, and he picked a dude up and threw him through a window, and got a round of applause for it.
Was this at the kebab thing?
No, I'd completely forgotten about that. So no, that's a totally different thing. No, this was like, there was always kind of a culture friction at the Forum, and there was like a weekender that we used to hold every bank holiday weekend. Was a big thing, basically free entry and loads and loads of music. And stupidly, I was allowed to curate the Sunday, so it was basically just hardcore heaven. It was every single random local band that I could find from all across Kent and Sussex. So it was reasonably busy, and all of the townie kids came down to try and kick off and start a fight because they had nowhere to go and didn't have anything to do. And I think he just wasn't in the mood for it that day. Normally it's the kind of thing you just brush off and you go inside or whatever and you ignore it. And it was, I think someone was basically giving a girl grief and he wasn't going to have any of it. Wow. And followed this guy across the road and literally picked him up off the ground and just threw him through this window. And it's the only time I've ever seen something like that. And
wow.
and then walked back with kind of that sort of like,
I can see that in my head already.
Who's on next?
Yeah.
Whilst all the bouncers are going, I kind of want to say thanks because we're not allowed to do that, but at the same time, I don't know whether you can come in now.
Yeah.
And there was a very confused moment. But
I think had it not been Jonny, so the bouncers would have been like, well, that's Jonny.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I think
because it was
we're going to allow
so
that.
yeah, because it was so uncharacteristic.
Yeah.
I think to the point is like it was that has never happened because, like you say, he was. I mean, he might as well have been a mute, right? For a very long time. My memories of him was he was designated Dave. He drove everybody around without ever asking for anything, and that was a huge privilege, which I think we don't actually appreciate at the time. And he was the one that would just sit there, look after the bags if you want to go and be an idiot and jump around or whatever. And he was very quiet. He observed everything that was going on, was how I sort of interpreted it. Yeah. So I guess because of that, of being that silent type and everything, although that's maybe the other indicator of like what's going on here, because he would never talk about anything, to then go and do something so extreme was just so out of character and unexpected that it was just like, yeah, Johnny did that. Totally.
Yeah. Well, I think it's safe to say that Jonny was the sort of person that would internalise everything.
Yeah.
So if we're, I'm thinking about back to maybe early noughties, and we'd be all hanging out and maybe, drinking, obviously not Jonny, but say Casties, the Ragged, those sort of things. There'd always be big groups of us. There'd always be quite a big group of us. Again, like you talked earlier about, there's a lot of circles that would overlap. And so there'd always be a load of us. No one wouldn't make any plans. You just go down there. And then what you'd end up with is quite a smorgasbord of people. A lot of people having quite a bit to drink, as we were of that age. And so you would normally get a little bit of tetchiness every now and then. Someone would, a little conversation would just get a little bit out of hand. You would never get that with Jonny, because he would just, as you said, he'd just be like, nah.
Yeah, all right, mate.
Yeah, fine. All right, you be that way. And then he would just go and
Don't be
do
that
his
guy.
own thing. He'd just go away, he'd walk away. There would never be any conflict. Yeah, and I suppose about that kind of time was when I was really having a bit of an awakening with my own mental health stuff. And so I'd be talking about it quite a lot, to those that I trusted. And so you started building a bit of a picture. I think you start noticing, actually, hang on a minute, there's an affinity here. You understand what I'm going through. You understand what I'm going through. And that was a real positive step for me to move into actually getting more of a handle on it. And I always knew that Jonny was kind of cut from the same kind of cloth with that. But then, amazing, and we've spoken about this, I think, since the fateful night, but Jonny never spoke to me about it. I knew that, because you kind of get a sense for it, but realised that actually, when I might have been talking to him and saying, I've been struggling, a little bit, or sorry, I'm a bit wired. I mean, you guys know me for years. You know that I can sometimes get a little bit loquacious when my brain starts running a bit hot. And so, and I'd say that, so I'm sorry, mate, I'm on a bit, I'm processing some stuff right now. He would never say, that's all right, man. No, I understand. And again, it's because I could see, looking back, it's quite clear that he dealt with everything internally. He processed, he would go away, he would think, and then he would come back. He would always, pick up conversations, but you'd think, no, he was actually never open. We're talking about it. I knew how his brain worked, but we actually never spoke. And it just always struck me as I only figured that out retrospectively, but I thought, that's kind of weird, because I've been pretty open with stuff. And there's a few of us that always were quite chatty about it. And I think maybe there's a lot of that comes from the confidence in your own self and your own grounding to understand where you are as a person. Because it took me years, it probably took me well over 10 years before I ever told anybody my issues with anxiety, my issues with depression. And just thinking, I never had that with Jonny, because there were certain things that I kicked myself back. You can't help when you look back. You think, come on, man, I know these signs. Why didn't I pick that up? And it's just an interesting thought that internalization of something. And then you spend the rest of your life going, I should have, coulda, woulda. And then you realise that, no, that's a path to nowhere.
Well, you did exactly what you should have done. And this is something that I try to teach people a lot now, is you open the invitation in a very soft way by talking about what's happening for you. So you've given that gift to somebody of saying, I'm cool talking about this with what's happening for me. It's up to them as to whether they want to do something with that, right? Yeah. He always listened without fail.
Oh, yeah.
And part of that is what I've always found quite distressing, is knowing that from my life, and that event was the last event of people taking their own lives in my life that I'd had enough of, and was like, this cannot be a continuation. This is not the regular occurrence that it should be. And so started exploring, what tools can I have and bring into that to sort of learn it, and realizing that in learning about how to be a counsellor and a trainer and coach and the other things that I've done since, is you're sponging all of that if you have nowhere for it to go, I don't know where it goes. And that I think back to that all the time now, because I think of all of the stuff that was going on then, and it was dark. There were some really dark things that were happening in our social circles, and he was absorbing all of it. And I think that's why I thought that the band is such a valuable thing, and why a lot of us do music. I feel shit until I go and stand in that room, and it's ventilation, isn't it? You find find an alternative method to be able to expel the stuff going on. But he listened to all of our bullshit. And as teenagers of breaking up with this girl and that girl, and oh no, now they're going out with that, he took all of that on, plus whatever he had happening and his family and everything else, and that's.
I think it felt like
massive.
I think it might have been a breaking point thing, because Rachel's had ended at that point. We'd all gone off and done our own things, so I think that vent shut for him, and I think it was a very useful way for him to deal with what was going on in his mind, and be able to express himself without throwing people through windows, maybe.
Well, it's a commitment to other people as well, isn't it? It's a demonstration of love and respect that you have in a band. Is no different to any other relationship, is that you are all agreeing on a Monday night, this is what we do, and then we go and do shows. And so it's a breakup and a divorce like any other. It's hard. It's hard to deal with.
It really is. That's a really interesting point, actually. I don't think I've ever thought about, the unity, the teamwork, the commitment from a band point. Now, I've been in a band since I was 13, since I could play guitar-ish, or just about play guitar and just about have a band.
How's that going?
Yeah. But, ultimately, I've been in the same band with the same three guys, essentially, since we were, 13, let's go 13. And there is a kind of unbreakable bond between that. And I've never really thought about it. I've pondered the catharsis of playing. Even in a rehearsal room or on stage, there is something amazing about just really pushing everything out there and giving it. And I've played shows when I probably shouldn't have done because of stuff that had gone on, people being really ill or coming from a hospital straight to a show. And my God, that was the most cathartic thing you've ever seen. You're just screaming yourself hoarse. And so but I feel that's kind of obvious. In a creative thing, the actual creative process is an obvious thing to feel that really helps me. But that's such a good point. The unity of working together, the committing and knowing that actually we've got to do this. So we're rehearsing here. It means I've got to move this. I've got to do that. Oh, no, we can make it work. No, we'll make it work because there was.
Well, and you've gone through that a lot, right?
Yeah.
If you think about it, like even those instances where say like think back to coming back off the Warped Tour.
Yeah.
You all were on the same page, right? Of like, this is actually not what we want to do anymore. Even that, I bet you felt fucking awful for months afterwards, because it's that it's like, oh, what we did, we're not getting together this weekend. Not in that context anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because the Warped Tour was a bit of a weird one, because the Warped Tour, the band we finished the Warped Tour and we carried on everything. We still went into plan of a writing process and everything, but the lead singer left the band halfway through Warped Tour, which was a real kind of weird moment. It broke him, which is, I understand, Warped Tour's pretty famous for that, especially West Coast. You're doing 11, 12, 13-hour drives. You're getting paid a packet of peanuts. It's mental. And yeah, fair enough. That's hard. We're in a van, literally just a van, with 6-piece band, tour manager, sound engineer, good old Loz.
Who went with him?
Straight off, which was brilliant.
Flight home,
and then,
okay.
And then also, journalist. We actually had a journalist travelling with us on that, because it was reported we were the first UK band to do Warped Tour, blah, 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 blah. And so there's actually a journalist. I also had one of the biggest anxiety attacks of my life on that tour, actually. A lot turned out to it.
Yeah,
but so you have to evolve. And again, that unity, something like that, right.
Exactly. So you banded together.
Straight away. I guess I'm a lead singer now, or co-lead singer with Danny Boy, because that moment, had to pick up Mark's parts and play guitar and sing and fine. And then that, I guess, cemented it. But coming back to your point, so when we came off the last tour and we just decided, you know what, we never broke up. We just thought, we're not going to progress from here. We feel like we're treading water. We're still young enough, but we need to get on with our lives. And that feeling of what do I do now on a Saturday?
Because I guess there's the relief. Like I remember when Here Them Monsters split up, we had similar kind of thing of that we were on a difficult tipping point, and at the same time at the point in lives where people were thinking families and all the rest of it.
Yeah, it changes. Mortgages change a lot.
Yeah, and you have that sort of moment. None of us were happy. We were all miserable, and we were going into it because we said we would to each other, And so when someone finally had the courage to say it, and it was Pete, the drummer, and we went and sat in the pub, and he went, "Listen, this is where I'm at." We all went, "Thank fuck."
Somebody to take the
someone
initiative.
said it,
Yeah.
And I think that, there's that relief, but I was still devastated of like these, it's been these 5 people, we've been this entity for like 7 years, and now I'm not going to see them every week. Yeah, and I think that those things are really hard.
I can flip it on its head a little bit here as well to bring it back to the topic. Very brief overview. Obviously, those who know me, those who don't, I've dealt with both my mother's suicide and my best friend's suicide, one after the other. I had this thing in my mind where it's like, I've done this already. I know what to do. I know how this is all going to pan out. I know the stages of grief. I've dealt with this level of stuff before, etc., etc., etc. So I started going into that. I assimilated into that mode again, bearing in mind I was far different age and different circumstances and everything else. And I was in Ugly Love at that time, who were making a little bit of a noise in the little pond that we were in and doing things, and it was good fun, and I really enjoyed myself. I was really enjoying myself. What I didn't do, and what I should have done, obviously, was pay more attention to my own mental health. I was putting everybody else's first because I felt like I'd had not a trial run, but I was aware of how other people might be processing somebody just disappearing with little to no warning. And what it did for me was it made me act out in very different ways. I was not a very pleasant person to be around a lot of the time during the year or two after that had happened. And I was not happy with being in the band that I was in when I was in Ugly Love. And I treated specifically Tom, the singer, I treated him like shit. I was not a good person. I was really venting my anger, not consciously, but that doesn't make any difference. I'm still responsible for my actions and what I did. I treated him really poorly, and there were a couple of shows that we did where I just acted out. I stayed in the van by myself, like some, glooming and sort of brooding is the word. I was, trying to not have this mistake, but I just couldn't fucking figure myself out, and it was everybody else's fault. And I made it very difficult for a lot of people for not a very long time, but long enough, because I wasn't dealing with my own shit. And it's another reason why I want to do this. It's another reason why we're doing the show. And it's another reason why I will always talk about mental health, is because it took me a long time until after that to realise that that's why I was acting that way. I'm not blaming Jonny for what happened. I'm taking account of the fact that it affected me in ways that I never really thought about properly. And in the process, it damaged a lot of friendships and relationships around me at that time. And I left that band. I made the decision to leave that band. And it took a while for me to get back on board with those people. And I don't think I've ever really expressed to them now that I know kind of why I was like that and some of the reasons why I acted the way that I did. But you talking about it being a breakup, which I agree with, the same with Rachel's, the same, and I brutally honestly, the same when I left the Hurt process. It does feel like a part of you has kind of been taken out. Yeah, and you have to replace it.
Yeah, you're not part of that family anymore, right?
It's nobody's fault.
Ugly Love is your rebound in
many
ways, right?
It's nobody's fault. None of those things were anybody's fault. But the situation remains. The fallout is the same. And what it comes down to after that then is a little bit of an element of control. And I felt like I didn't have any control in things in that time, in the space of 16 and 03. In the space of 6 or 7 years, I had lost two very important people to me. So I want to be in control now. I want to be the one to say, no, I'm going to leave. You're not going to kick me out. We're not going to disband. I'm going to leave.
Right.
And I need to be the one that moves the parts and do the things here, which is the eventual thing that I came to. And this is what I mean when I said previously on other podcasts, it's taken me a while to become emotionally aware of this stuff. It's not always been the case. But things like dealing with suicide and dealing with the fallout of any kind of mental health issues, drug addiction, alcoholism, I've spoken to people about all sorts of different things, having to deal with shit that comes out of being gay or lesbian, etc., the amount of abuse they have to deal with, which obviously, fucks with people's heads. It's just having that open mind and being able to say, you know what, I fucked that up, but I've learned from it and I'm going to move on and I'm going to make
100%. Ownership is really important. And I think something... coming from what you've just said there, and something that I think that helped me contextualize my own brain with that, and I think we've all been talking about something quite similar here, which is that when it comes to mental health, let's just be massive. I'm going to really generalize here, but let's just put a mental health issue, a mental health hurdle, let's say something. A lot of it, I think, can be summed up as a vacuum. So we're talking about loss, grief. We're talking about losing a band. We're talking about, it could be anything. It could be losing a venue. Let's say your local venue closes where that's part of your identity. That's where you've been going. And it causes a vacuum. Now, I think we could say this the same. We could talk about this from an addiction point of view. Yeah, there is a vacuum. There's something you could try and do that. Or somebody trying to overcome their own acceptance of who they are. Sexuality, gender, whatever. We could almost distill it down to this sense of a vacuum. There is something that is eating away that we're trying to get to. And I think it's been brilliant over the last few years where we have seen the volume of this conversation get louder. But I think also there's a tendency, because the more we hear it, the more common it becomes in general conversation, we can be a bit reductive. And the way we think about it, we've got to talk about mental health. I'm struggling at the moment. I need to talk about it. Well, fuck yeah, you do. But also, it's not as airy-fairy as it can sometimes sound if we look at it in the kind of high street projection of it. Oh yes, we all need to look out for our friends if we do that. Yeah. No, it's actually pretty dark and it's dingy and it's grimy when there is a problem, when one of those vacuums explodes, be it a moment of acute grief, and you have to look at that and realize that no, I do kind of need to put my tin hat on and go into this head first, and I need to talk about it. But also, we don't have a moment of where we're at our ultimate low or we're really struggling to comprehend something. When we're at that point, I can't just, I rely on Matt a lot. We talk a lot. He's the kind of friend I can rely on. He'll reach out. You haven't texted in a while, mate. You're all right. And I can't just say to Matt, I'm struggling with my mental health and miraculously I'm better. No, I have to slash through it and go through and talk about it and process and do all of that. And it's always in the sense of chasing that vacuum. If I can turn that off, if that will just quieten down in my brain, then I know I can move forward and step forward. And so with that, with you saying about how you knew that looking back, you were a bit of a shit. That's you hacking and slashing your way through to get to the root of the problem. And what's brilliant about how you dealt with that is your mental health is not your fault, right? We can't help how our brains have happened to coalesce into a whole load of chemicals and hormones that like to fuck us every now and then. You can't help that. It is not your fault, but it is your responsibility. Yeah. And being able to recognize, the older I've gotten, the more I've looked into my own brain a bit and try and understood what drives me, where that fear, where that inadequacy, whatever it is that's nibbling, the more I get a handle on that, the more I realize that it's actually about acceptance and understanding that that vacuum may still be there. That's okay. It doesn't actually rule my life. And it's my responsibility to find my way through this. And I'm not going to do that on my own. I'm going to do that by having the people that I can rely on. And the people that you can rely on are the people that have an affinity with it. So I'm very comfortable. I don't think, Andy and I, we've never really spoken about how our brains operate, but I am completely comfortable just laying myself bare and saying, this is what really got me. This is what put me down. This is how I had to claw my way back. But that's because I know that you understand. And so therefore I'm not having to feel, because sometimes I can, in the early days, I felt I was actually, doesn't actually make sense. This is semantically incorrect, but I was actually creating more of a vacuum. I was putting more in because I was constantly worried that you're going to judge me for this.
Yeah.
You're going to think
that's a very classical anxiety.
You're that 6'7" massive
thing.
guy, and here you are. You should be all right. Blah, blah, blah. No, never all right. Never. Literally never all right. There's always something.
The thing is it was something that I was very aware of that I used to really enjoy making the most of. I would go out of my way to make you feel uncomfortable. Whenever I did your sound, I would make sure that I would say something down the microphone that only you can hear in the monitor to distract you. Because
your guitar sounds shit.
Yeah.
Oh, why'd you play that?
Is he really still playing with that iPad?
Another pinched harmonic, Tom?
Yeah. And I would do that all the time. And it was in part because I think it's how I ended up falling in love with the people in my band, because they were very similar to your lot, is that you were and still are an anomaly to your friendship group. And it's not about the size thing, because I just took that and I thought, man, that is a shit hand to be dealt, to be that tall, because it's a given, right? That you're going to have insecurities about that have kicked around from childhood and beyond, and then we're meeting each other as teenagers. That's only going to be worse. But you were with three guys who belched and farted and pinched each other's balls every 5 seconds, and you were the quiet one on the corner, and I was just like, I am going to ruin him.
I love the fact that you refer to me as the quiet one in the corner. Everybody else would be like, hang on, they said they've known each other for years. You've met Tom, right? But no, you are right. There is...
You were.
Honestly,
you
being
were
the
the
size
quiet
I am
one.
was massively the issue that I had as well.
Yeah.
Because, and actually it came out in like a therapy session after about a year of therapy. And the counsellor saying, I was talking about this and blah, 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 blah. And she said, I kind of get it now. She's like, you've had zero anonymity your entire life. And it's like, shit. Yeah, I guess every time I walk in a room, everyone notices who you are.
You were a very present person.
But then I put my way of dealing with that was to put myself on the stage. So if you're going to look at me, if you're going to judge me, then I'll give you a goddamn reason to look at me and judge me.
I think I always enjoyed hanging out with you lot. And in the same way as with Jonny or anyone else within our sort of like friendship group, was you for our generation, which is a messed up thing to be saying, Matt.
I'm not even part of your generation.
You're not even,
I don't know.
You've got your own generation. Our generation,
we Gen X
alone,
or we millennial? We're cusp, right? We're cusp.
Tipping point. It's unspoken. So the reason why we were a community, and I remember someone saying to me once about like where you find your happiness is with your tribe, that we were a tribe. It's the Metalhead tribe. We are a group of people. We have this shared thing that's brought us together, and it carries with it other stuff. And we got there because we had that. So there is an unspoken acknowledgement of, you like Machine Head? Yeah, you're fucked as well. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
God, that's
cool,
so
right?
true.
And
So
you just
true.
never talked about it. It's like, you get bullied at school? Yeah, same. Yeah. Okay, cool. Because you know. So you don't talk about it. Well, maybe we could have done.
Yeah.
But let's face it, 30 years later, we are talking about it.
Yeah.
So...
And we're still coming together in the same places.
And we're still getting together, and
When I drag you all into a room.
Yeah, with that. Yeah, exactly.
Well, but that's
with
what
the
it is.
same
You go,
shared goal.
I'm thinking of doing this. Yes.
Yeah.
Is it, mate? I'm wondering. Yeah. Whatever you say, it's like, I'll play. I'll do it. Of course I will.
Yeah.
Well, I think I'd fucking love to carry on with this.
No, mate, we'd go forever.
We could go forever, but I can hear the boys already sort of starting up in the other room, so we better get to rehearsal. But
Pressure.
I think that was...
Catharsis.
I really enjoyed talking to you guys about that. I think we covered a lot of things. Hopefully it was useful to other people as well. Who knows? Nice little trip down memory lane, but also some important messages. And maybe some breakthroughs and things that we can think about as well.
Definitely. No, you guys definitely gave me, you've certainly given another little thing to ponder on, which is always good because it's ultimately growth.
Yeah. Something I'd love to just emphasise with both of you, but anyone that listens as well, is one of the things that we've been talking about is that you don't have the necessary tools and skills to know. Like, no one's ever going to know the situation. I think about it a lot. I genuinely do. I don't know how you did what you did. No one will ever be prepared for that moment. But services like Mental Health First Aid England and the first aider training that they do is well worth investing in. I am so glad that I did it, because it doesn't solve things. It's about knowing how to triage that stuff that's going on, not just for an individual that might be in crisis, but for all of those people around as well, because we're not prepared. This is not what you get taught in school.
Yeah.
It's not, it's not something that's very common, and to look it up and do the course. It's hard, because I think everyone that I've met, so I now help with training other people to be mental health first aiders, and everyone is coming to that course with a story. There is a trigger motivation for doing it. So there are going to be modules within that are around a specific topic that is why you got there. And we always talk about how the third day of the course, which is on suicide, is the hardest one to work on, because the majority of people that do it is from having had someone in their life, a loved one, take their life, and it is very triggering. But they come away from it feeling that they know, they understand it a little bit more, of recognizing there is nothing that you can do.
Yeah.
You cannot, like the idea of like suicide prevention, I totally understand. You cannot be in someone else's mind, but you can be there to listen to them.
Yeah.
That's something I want to look into. I think it's something that I would benefit from.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
For real.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, mate.
We're going to go make some noise now, and hopefully we'll sound all right at the show. Andy and Tom, thanks, guys. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
man.
you.
Thank you very much for listening. I hope that gave you a bit of an understanding as to why we're doing this and the person that we're doing this for. If you didn't know Jonny, please still come down to any one of the shows that are happening across that weekend on the 8th and the 9th. As I say, Smallwoodstock is now in the basement of the Sussex on Saturday the 8th. Jack Mackey and Lee Wills will be up at the Gin Box by the George. We've got Dicky Ticker, Phoenix Fires and Move Over Darley. They're up at the Cross Keys. Upstairs at the Sussex we still have Vinyl Tap, and then on Saturday the 9th we will have Code Marler with their show as well, along with Bombay Monkey and Palindrones. Palindrones? I think I'm saying that right. We'll find out. Please do give the charity we're sponsoring, or we're raising funds for this year, is Mind, both West Kent and West Sussex. There will be links all around the venues with QR codes for you to enter your information to scan, etc., so that you can donate monies. And luckily, now that we're in the basement of Sussex, all the funds that are raised through ticket sales will go directly to the charity. We're not seeing a penny of this. There's no hire fee. Thank you very much to the Sussex Arms for helping us out with that and raising money. The whole point of this is, as I said, to raise awareness of mental health issues, to start the conversation with people, to look at the link between music and mental health, and to raise money for charities that could help people that are suffering with poor mental health. We really hope that you guys will come down and that you'll start the conversations. That's probably my cat. It's a live house here. Thanks, Calcifer. She's desperate to get on the podcast. We want to keep the conversation going about mental health, so we can't wait to see you at any one of those shows. And please listen out for the 4th podcast coming soon. Thank you.